We are tonight's entertainment.
You can't handle the truth.
The fire rises.
Pizza time.
You're a wizard, Harry.
So it begins.
You know how much I sacrificed?
You think that's air you're breathing?
Groovy.
I don't have friends. I got family.
We are Sex People! 1, 2, 3, 4!
Craft Services.
Hey, Trent.
Hi, Parth.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, too. You're looking well.
You're looking well as well. What have you been eating most recently?
I worked today, and they've been doing Uber Eats orders. Usually, I would be sent as a PA to go pick up the lunch, but I'm something above not a PA right now, so they have to Uber Eats it.
Wow.
But the consequence of that is we ordered from like a bowls place, and only one of the 3 things came. And then I called someone, and I was like, only one thing came. And then they were like, it was $90, and then they weren't thrilled. Then they called in some more food from Dig.
Whoa, Dig. Classic thing from near my house that... Did you get Dig with me one time?
A couple times.
Was that when we watched Hot Frosty, or was that a different time?
Wow, enough said. But then I had some Dig, and then one of the guys said on set, because for the past few days, it has been bowls, like bowl sort of food, or salad bowls, or rice bowls.
Sure.
And he was like, I've just had to fuck enough of these bowls. And so he walked to Cat's Deli, and he got a pastrami sandwich.
Nice.
And then he was like, this was so good. And he was going on how good it was. And then he was like, Trent, do you want the other half? And it was such a ridiculous
Wow.
offer of half a $32 sandwich, $16, that I was like, you're kidding. And he was like, no, like, I've had enough. And he gave it to me. And so during the 3rd interview, it was long. And so I just have to lay on the floor and be quiet. And so I laid on the floor in another room and ate a sandwich.
That's wonderful, Trent. As someone that has had to order meals for sets, rice bowls are pretty ideal because you can get like protein and vegetables or whatever.
And the vegetarians can be happy. No one can really complain about
But after
not
the
being
like
accommodated.
4th rice bowl that you've given on set, like, you know, you got to break it up, you know?
We're only on day 2 of the rice bowls.
Okay, what the hell are people complaining about?
Right. Well, Cat's Delicatessen was like right there, so
Sure.
I don't blame him. But what have you been eating?
Well, Trent, as we speak, it's a Friday night, and my familia decided they want to have some family friends over and ordered some za. And
Pizza.
so pizza for the uninitiated. So I had margarita pizza, and then my dad ordered baked ziti pizza, which had baked ziti on top of the pizza. And when I first saw it, I thought it was penne vodka pizza, and I was really excited. And then I thought my dad was like, "No, it's baked ziti pizza," and I was like, "Okay."
Mm-hmm.
I'm not
Was it
unhappy
good?
about it, but you know,
Was it good?
yeah, it was good. It was good. It was solid.
I love pizza, and I feel like the one type of pizza that's never really appealed to me is sort of pasta on pizza.
Yeah.
Because sort of why?
I mean, maybe is it like too carby for you? Like, it's too much bread on bread?
It's like it doesn't introduce a new element.
Sure. I can understand that. But this is what I think you and I both agree on, is that the margarita pizza is just sort of the best that it ever gets.
You mean fancy cheese? Well, margarita, it's if you're ordering for a room, rather than saying let's get a cheese pizza, I feel like the margarita should be the default.
I agree. I agree completely. If not for my very good friend Sophia Alexis, who prefers a cheese to a margarita.
Parth, if Sophia was here, if she was
Right.
in the room,
I'm
and then
interested to see how you do this.
just wait. And then she walked, say, into the other room. And then I was like, we need to talk to her. We need to talk about I have a Gone Girl question. She's the expert.
Because she was on the Gone Girl discussion that we did a few years back.
Let's get her back. Let's take her from where she is.
Right.
And let's bring her back to here.
Wow.
Bring her back.
How interesting. Kind of the movie of the day, for which I need to cue the intro. Welcome back to Craft Services, where we talk about the movies. Each week we talk about a film and hopefully have a crew member of that film to talk with us about their experience working on the picture. This week, who are we talking with, Trent?
Wait, didn't we talk with cinematographer Aaron McLisky?
We sure
Wait.
did.
Didn't he did the Filippo brothers sophomore feature, Bring Her Back, but let's not forget, he also shot their first movie, the smash horror sensation, Talk to Me, a movie Parth has seen. I haven't seen it yet, but I want to now. After enjoying Bring Her Back.
I mean, going from Bring Her Back to Talk to Me is probably it's an easier experience, I think, Talk to Me.
I mean, Bring Her Back was pretty intense.
Yes, but intense in all the best ways, which we really get into in this part 1 with Aaron McLisky. He gets into, how he got together with the Filippo brothers via Instagram, how Talk to Me led to Bring Her Back. He gets into some lensing choices and how they sort of get character focused. Trent, I edited this interview earlier today, so I know exactly what happens in this part 1.
Clearly, you just communicated it pretty well back to the audience.
I think, Trent, we've been yammering on long enough, and the audience should just be able to listen to the interview.
Wait, don't you think I should count to like 250 first? Here, I'll start.
I count down.
Okay, I'll count down. 250, 249.
Keep. Why are you stopping? Like, I'm going to edit the...
I thought it would happen already. 248, 247. Parth, help me out. 246. Parth.
Trent, it's not getting there till you get to 0.
Bring her back to me.
Cue the interview. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our interview with Aaron McLisky. He's the cinematographer behind our film for this week, the Filippo brothers' sophomore feature, Bring Her Back, as well as their first film, Talk to Me. Thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on, guys. It's exciting to be here.
Thank you. So just to start off, can you talk about when you first knew you wanted to become a cinematographer?
Yeah, I guess my brief history in filmmaking and sort of the journey to becoming a cinematographer was that when I was young, obviously in school, I kind of was gravitating more towards the arts, picked up a stills camera and was, really falling in love with sort of photography. And that was kind of the entry point. I actually grew up in Indonesia. I went to high school there. I lived there for 10 years. And after that, I really kind of wanted to figure out which direction, I wanted to go after high school. And I went to a bunch of kind of universities and looked at different film programs and media programs and arts programs. I ended up in Australia studying anthropology and media, screen production. And that kind of took me through to, finding a bit of my love for filmmaking and film craft. And then, as I sort of stumbled through kind of life in those early stages, I was really kind of gravitating towards storytelling and filmmaking. I thought I wanted to do documentary. That's why I went with anthropology. And it actually kind of ended up that I studied sort of editing and I did all the different bases. I was an editor. I was a director of commercials. I did a whole bunch of different things. And then I actually moved to New York City, where there I decided that, I wanted to kind of uproot everything. I wasn't exactly sure. I was a master of everything and kind of didn't really have a specific focus. And it was in New York City where I was working on some film sets there and kind of buddied up with the cinematographer and realized that everything kind of made sense, that cinematography was the language that I wanted to tell stories through. And so I came back to Australia and started in the camera department and worked my way through assisting and operating and started shooting. So that's kind of the quickest summary of the journey towards cinematography.
So you also shot the Filippo brothers' first film, Talk to Me. Can you talk about first being introduced to them and how you were brought on board for that?
Yeah, so basically I was shooting a lot of television and I was looking for a really good sort of film project that, I could really sink my teeth into. And I was working on a TV show called Mr. In Between, and one of the cast members there mentioned to me that he'd read a script that was this sort of indie horror that was really exciting. And it just so happened that at the same time I was sort of looking at Causeway Films. I'd pitched to try and work on their film You Won't Be Alone, and unfortunately that didn't quite work out. But I'd known a lot about Causeway Films and their slate and the things that they'd made, like the Babadook and a few other things. So I was very interested in them as a company. I thought they were doing really amazing things. And it was sort of fortuitous that this actor was talking about this script that was circulating and had been circulating for a while. My agent I'd been pushing my agent here in Australia to reach out to Causeway to see if they had any other projects. And it just so happened that Talk to Me was something that they had developed with the boys, and they were looking to kind of find a cinematographer, or at least the boys were. And I think it was at a period of like maybe a couple of weeks where I was, pushing my agent and kind of hearing other actors talk about this script that everyone was reading for, that I got a DM on Instagram from Danny. And Danny had seen a short film that I'd shot, and he had just written to me, and he was like, "Yo, I really loved what you did on that short film. Would love to have a chat. I've got a feature that I'm looking to do. If you'd be interested, it would be really cool to connect." And it was kind of like, wow, okay, this is kind of random. I didn't actually know who Raka Raka was, and I didn't know who Danny was, but I knew of the project. So when he said Talk to Me, I kind of put two and two together and went, wow, like this is the same project. So from there, it kind of everything snowballed. Causeway reached out. We had like official interviews, and I was DMing, Danny on Instagram, and that's kind of how it all started. It was just sort of like a social media reach out, which, now that I know the guys, like that's perfectly how it all happened. And so it was kind of exciting, unfortunately it was around COVID time, so things were, a little nerve-wracking. I just shot this other film which actually got shut down by COVID, and they were looking to kind of gear up again and try and finish it. And I knew that Causeway really wanted Talk to Me to happen. So I was kind of looking at trying to finish that project and really interested in Talk to Me. And as soon as kind of Causeway locked in cast and everything was kind of looking good, and they'd kind of approved or accepted that, I was going to shoot it, we were on. The rest was history. I was kind of flying down to Adelaide to meet the guys.
Yeah, to Talk to Me was great, and was also sort of like a breakout big success. And I was sort of wondering, as a DP, what your experience of that success was, and how that, if at all, sort of led into you learning about Bring Her Back.
Yeah, so when I met the guys, they have so many projects, they have so many ideas. Like they've been making films and doing the kind of backyard filmmaking since they were kids. And I knew that they had other projects they had been writing. I actually think that they were writing Bring Her Back at the same time that they were writing Talk to Me. So Danny, who writes with Bill Hinsman, his kind of co-writer, they have constantly got like other projects on the boil. Like Danny, when you speak to Danny, he's not writing one thing, he's writing multiple things. And he kind of jumps between them. So when we did Talk to Me, I kind of had heard whispers of other things. But, when we were making Talk to Me, it was a really, really difficult shoot. And it was a gamble. Like, these YouTube guys, and nobody knew. We knew that something was special about the project. But, when you're making something and you're deep in it, and you're kind of like just trying to problem solve, get through the days, and just manage all the different sort of department needs and schedule requirements, you're not sure. And you kind of get to the end and you think, you kind of have that breath, that moment where you're like, was that good? Like, we're just, just not sure. And so it was kind of like the boys went into edit, and obviously, we started talking about, where's this film going to go, and kind of how's this going to, where's its home? And obviously the boys kind of had their expectations, like they were realistic about it. And we'd spoken about Sundance and the idea that mathematically the odds of us getting into Sundance was like something crazy. I think they worked out the odds, and it was just like impossible odds. So we'd kind of like given up on that idea. It was funny because Sam Jennings, the producer at Causeway, she obviously had a few films at Sundance. She had a bit of a connection to Sundance and the programmers, and she kind of said, "No, guys, like I think let's see," because I think a promo reel went to Cannes, where a lot of people were interested in it off the promo reel. So we kind of had this idea that maybe something's going to happen. And I still remember the day that, Danny called me and he was screaming down the phone. He was just like, "We got ahead!" Like, I can't believe it. Like, we actually got into Sundance. Like, this is crazy. Like, how a little film we shot in Australia in 5 weeks. Like, how the hell, that this is all happening. It was like a fairy tale. And then all of a sudden we're all in Sundance, and celebrating the fact that we are, we made something. And as for independent filmmakers, like, it's the greatest thing to happen to a project, and for any kind of young up and coming first time directors, the goal is Sundance as a platform, or other festivals obviously But for us, it was just it's incredibly exciting to be part of it. So obviously, when we're at Sundance, that's when I think the boys were like, we really need to start preparing, for the next thing, because if this goes well, we really need to prep, to have something else on the boil. And there was talk of Street Fighter, that kind of thing, that happened sort of after the deal, the A24 deal. And then there was talk of obviously bringing it back, and a couple others. They've got a couple other scripts that they're looking at.
Can you talk about what's unique about working with co-directors and maybe how some of the work is divided and how it might be advantageous?
Yeah, so the boys, co-directors, as a blanket term, I think is, interesting. I've worked with Nash Edgerton and Joel Edgerton, and they have a dynamic that's quite beautiful. Nash is sort of the guiding light. He's the real craft master. He's the filmmaker, and then Joel, has a real sort of performance nuance and has an ability to kind of elevate performance. And then obviously working with the boys, it's a similar dynamic. Danny's obviously the writer. He really understands a lot of the stories, a lot of the ideas and scenes that come out of these films are from Danny's real, from his life, from his experiences. And so he can speak to a truth that kind of helps guide the whole project. But together with Michael, his brother, Michael basically brings an energy and just like a sounding board for Danny, but he also brings his own sort of focus and his own preparation, and he has different strengths. So Michael has a lot of experience in stunts, and Michael has a very strong sort of focus with sound and music, and so together they kind of like help each other. And so when you're on set, you hear two voices, and often they can be differing, different ideas, but ultimately they're all going in the same direction. So it's a really unique thing, because it's actually refreshing, because when you're working on set, one director might be speaking to the actors, where another one's watching playback and just kind of reviewing the take from a technical perspective, and together they'll kind of recap. And then again, Sam Jennings, who's a very involved story producer, she'll be there as well, part of that kind of like core group who are looking at all these things. So it's a really powerful little posse when we're making these things, which I find really efficient and also just like really exciting, because there's never a bad idea. Everyone's quite open, and the boys are incredibly collaborative. So they have a great dynamic, and they also sort of like involve other people in a really interesting and sort of like refreshing way.
Can you talk about the development process for Bring Her Back and sort of break down what look you were trying to achieve with this movie?
Yeah, so I think with any project, for me, it's really important to service the story, obviously. And so trying to find a visual language is almost sort of the whole thing for me, right? Is I'm not looking to kind of repeat myself, and I certainly don't want to feel like I'm just, doing the same look. So with every film, I personally am looking for a different entry point. And the boys are the same. Like every film, like Talk to Me, they had really specific sort of like intention around how they wanted it to feel. And that's something I translated through to lensing, to camera, and to lighting. And so with Bring It Back, there was this discussion about light and darkness, and just about how we were going to articulate blindness visually, and how we were going to sort of visually explain the different perspectives that were happening, and how we were going to sort of use the camera and use the visual language to help illustrate the three perspectives. And a lot of our reference when we were sort of early days, we're looking at Psycho Biddy films from the 50s, and we were looking at, different ways of compositionally, we wanted to feel kind of like this house was the character, and this house was so much of the setting for the entire film, and how that house, how we light that house, how we lens that house, how we frame rooms, how we work with production design to tell the story of these three characters. And so the look of Bring It Back wanted to sort of have this lightness to it that transitions to darkness, and this kind of idea that, Piper's character and Billy is sort of, there's this optimism at the start of the film that maybe, Laura's character's, her home is going to be welcoming. And then slowly, as her plans start to unfold, everything changes, and sort of the lighting changes and the color changes. And so there was a lot of different sort of thematic ideas visually that we tried to track through Bring It Back that were different to Talk to Me.
Can you talk about what your pre-production process looks like in terms of whether it's like storyboarding or shot listing, and when you get on set, how much flexibility there is to alter that plan?
As a sort of policy, it's very important for me to do as much prep as possible. And I think, it's pretty obvious that preparation means that on the day, your intuition is so informed that you can change the plan because you're so focused in on exactly what the intention of a scene or the intention of a particular look, like that if things change, which they always do, you have this like incredible matrix of why it is and isn't the right decision to make in the moment. And so in pre-production, often, and something we learned from Talk to Me, because obviously when we started Talk to Me, we had a delay just because of COVID, and there was a chance that the film was actually going to fall over because cases were rising and we were stuck in a sort of hotel quarantine for a little while. But in that time, the boys and I spent basically our days watching films, discussing sort of references, using our iPhones to kind of shoot little scenes and sort of cut them together. So for me, that's basically kind of like a must-have. Is I don't necessarily get down to storyboard level. I think we do these sort of like shinematics where we kind of shoot everything, like on our phones, and we edit them, and that gives us a good sense of pace and a good sense of camera movement. If there's specific sequences that we can't do that, if there's set pieces that are bigger, that, we don't have a location that represents correctly what we're trying to do, then we will go to storyboarding. And that's purely to help other departments understand, what we're doing. But often I find that these days with digital cameras and specifically iPhones, it's so easy to get stand-ins and shoot the scene cheaply, on location ideally, and use that. And I mean, I've self-taught as an editor. The boys were editors, and I love being able to kind of shoot a bunch of stuff, go home, quickly cut it up, see how the flow feels, see how coverage is feeling, and then basically share that with other departments. That's a kind of a big process that we do. And shot listing is incredibly important. We need every single scene mapped out. I tend to do these like very detailed documents where I map out sort of the shot plan, and that sort of informs lighting. But again, it's all this planning. It takes us to the day and allows us to understand what's important. But if things change, because naturally, like actors will feel a location and change the way they want to block something, or like we are ready for that. But without that preparation, what I think ends up happening is you fall into very conventional coverage, and that sort of TV model, which, I have done a lot of in the past, you start to feel like there's no perspective. The camera isn't telling the story or isn't helping to tell the story. It's just documenting. It's covering. And, that has its place. And there are certain situations where that's a very, very important skill to have as a cinematographer, is know how to cover a scene when it all falls apart. But I think the preparation gives you the sort of like the perspective. And that's something that I found really important when I work with my camera operators and my focus pullers, is just trying to get them to understand what visual style, what visual language I'm trying to apply, so that in a situation where we do have to change the plan, they're also thinking in the same way that I am. They understand the language, and they're offering shots that are not just aesthetically interesting, but actually go, hey, like this character is going to feel this way, and this scene is about this. So what if I place the camera here? And if I have those conversations with my operators, that's where I want to be. That's the kind of filmmaking that I'm interested in.
So jumping on perspective, we read that you use different lenses when you were shooting Piper versus Andy. Can you talk about how you came to that decision and sort of what specifically you were doing differently to differentiate that perspective?
Yeah, so early in pre-production, we were really kind of breaking the script down and really trying to understand that, this was like a three-hander, effectively. It's like you've got Laura. It's basically the shifting in perspectives was so strong. It wasn't like a solo perspective, perhaps like Talk to Me, where it was very much about Mia. For us, it was like, or for me, I was looking for a way to differentiate between the different perspectives and how I could sort of subtly tell. And again, it's sometimes it's imperceptible, right? It's these philosophies that you apply to a general audience may just completely not appear. But for us, it was important to sort of create a different feeling and look for the different characters. Basically Piper's character, she was blind in the film, and we wanted to create a certain feeling with her lensing that, when the shallowness of the focus, the sort of aberration of the lensing, and that, highlights were blooming in a way that perhaps, because she says in the film, I see shapes and color and light. And it was sort of like, okay, well, how do we articulate that with her camera? So when we're with her, what kind of lens would interestingly do that? And so we looked at a very, different types of lenses, and we sort of found these Arri movie cam lenses that sort of like rehoused old stills lenses that had all these kind of interesting characteristics. When we started, comparing the lenses, we looked at DNA lenses, which is what we used for Billy Andy's character. And then we sort of looked at these Petzval lenses, these sort of rehoused Russian lenses for Laura's character. And each lens kind of, we felt, had an idea of how we kind of articulated the perspective. So with Laura's character, there's this whole idea that she's, running this ritual, and that circles were an important motif to the boys. And so when we actually were doing some tests on the Petzvals, we realized that the bokeh and the way the lenses worked on the 58 kind of mil is that, there were this swirling effect of the focus. And Danny and Michael were like, oh my God, this is Laura's lens. Like, this is when we're kind of in her world and in her kind of like psychosis as she's, as the film's progressing, like we really want to be leaning towards these lenses because we want to feel that circular sort of is overtaking her kind of mind. So that was sort of that kind of lens. And then we were looking at Billy's character. He kind of sees the world for what it is. And so we wanted something slightly cleaner that sort of was like what we called the truth lens, so that, again, he's the barometer of like what's happening. And again, Laura's character's trying to change what truth means to him. And so it was about giving his lens a slightly more grounded, slightly more sort of cleaner look. And that's kind of where we landed with the DNA lenses.
I heard in an interview with the directors and talking about scouting the central house that they wanted something very specific for the pool. And I heard that some of the rooms were on location and some were built. If you just talk about spaces that were built versus on location.
Yeah, so again, the house was such an important part of the story. It's, a contained horror film in a house, really. And we wanted this house to have this multifunctional thing. It was very specific to the boys that the pool needed to be the centerpiece, that every room in the house, you were able to see the pool or feel the pool, because the pool had played such an important role for Laura's character, Sally Hawkins, and sort of what that pool meant to her and what that pool means in terms of her grief. And so we scouted everywhere in Adelaide to find a house that wrapped around a circular pool. Now, that was an incredibly difficult brief. And I think, we looked at like so many different types of houses, and we got close. We found really good pools, but the house didn't offer much. We found really great houses, but they didn't have a pool. And we went back and forth between what is it better to have a house and then create a pool, build a pool, or and so as we were kind of getting to the end of our location scouting, we stumbled upon this house, which is the house that you see in the film, that had a triangular pool. And as soon as we walked into the space, it had every element that Danny and Michael were looking for. All the rooms faced this pool. It wasn't a circular pool, but then Danny was like, "Oh, I've sort of changed my mind. Like, I think that there will be the circle will be revealed in the pool later, and that we're being a little too over the, maybe we're a bit obvious when there's a circular pool." So it sort of suddenly it went great. Okay, but then we realized, okay, well, this house is basically 80% perfect. But it doesn't have a pool shed, which is an incredibly important location. And it doesn't have enough rooms because the actual house itself didn't facilitate that exact thing. But standing from the pool, you could see these kind of storage windows up at the top, which kind of look like a second level. And that was the genesis for like, well, let's just build those windows. Let's build rooms on a stage. And just we'll use the house as the sort of the basis, and then we'll go to the stage. Now, the boys are incredibly tactile filmmakers. They respond to locations. That working in a set was a new thing for them. On Talk to Me, we built one set, was just Mia's bedroom, and that was just purely because we had the house that we shot, Mia's house. To do this sort of stunt work in that house was probably near impossible in terms of the damage we would do to the house. So that's why we lent to a set. And so the boys were very, familiar with sets, and they know exactly the benefit of having a set, the flexibility we have. But shooting like a lot of the film in these sets was a new thing for them. So that was a whole process of sort of really getting to sort of familiarize ourselves with those sets and also believe that those sets were real spaces. So it was a very big thing to kind of make sure that the design of those sets really reflected the house, which was, Vanessa did a great job of making. Vanessa Stone, the production designer, did an incredible job of sort of articulating each character's room visually and from a design perspective. And you'll see in the film, Laura's room is got all this sort of like antiques, and it's darker tones, and it has this kind of like she's traveled the world. She's got a lot of sort of unique sort of characteristics to hers. And then, that Piper's room is obviously Kathy's old room, which has got all the sort of memorabilia of Kathy and what, that sort of, she's kind of, it's like a tomb. It's like, and the way that it's designed and the colors, it's supposed to feel inviting and very warm and sort of like a womb, almost like that she's kind of nurturing this relationship with her. And then Billy's character is pushed into like effectively what we saw it as like a storage room. And the design was, like it just, the whole space was supposed to feel uncomfortable for him. And the sort of angular roof and the way that the bed was too short, and that he's kind of like, it's a mattress, like pushed into the corner, like all these decisions.
Covered under the stairs.
Exactly. It was like, that was intentional. That was like, we wanted those different feelings in those different spaces. And that was designed specifically to kind of help articulate the character's experience.
We're back.
As the kids say.
That's what the kids be saying.
We're so back. Yeah, like Monday through Saturday, it's like, who knows where we are?
Yeah, we have no idea.
If you want to know where Parth is, I have his location. I'll send it to you so I know. But the average Joe doesn't know. If you want his home address, his email, talk to me.
Okay.
Parth, see what I did there? Talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll bring Parth to you. Mm-hmm. On a silver platter.
That's great. And then, just talking about bringing people back, we hope we can bring back Aaron McLisky, because he was such an awesome guest talking to us, some cool information. And, there's more. Like the Philippou brothers, they didn't just stop at Talk to Me. They're like, we need a part 2 in our career. And so they made Bring Her Back. And just like that, we have Aaron McLisky part 2 coming out next week on all your major podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Pandora, wherever you get your podcasts, really.
Did you hear the Philippou brothers made Bring Her Back instead of a Street Fighter movie?
I did know that.
Hopefully they make a Street Fighter movie
We get into
next.
that, I think. I can't remember if it's this part of the next one. But yeah, it is in this one.
Cool fact.
Yes.
But yeah, Instagram, Twitter, we have socials, Craft Services Podcast. Tell a friend.
Mm-hmm.
Tell your parents.
Tell your dog. Tell your cat.
Yeah. If you have like an exotic pet, don't tell them.
If you have a girlfriend that lives in Canada, just let her know.
If you met someone special at camp or on a cruise, or they go to another school in a different county far away, tell them. But Parth, thanks to Aaron McLisky, you a beast at the end of the interview, who was like, oh, you didn't hear this yet, but he was like, I'm working on a bunch of cool stuff. Can't talk about it.
And he off air, he let us know about some of them. And let me just say, it's all cool stuff.
But we can't tell you. Sorry, Charlie. Yeah, that's just priv info for Parth and I. Mm-hmm. But if you want to know where Parth is, his location,
yeah, just contact Trent.
Contact me. But I don't go handing away my info because that's weird.
No.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye guys.